Geronimo's final desperate raids and surrender. Geronimo's hand tightened around his rifle as he watched Lieutenant Davis from the shadows of Turkey Creek. The terms he'd accepted from Chief Gray Wolf in the Sierra Madre Mountains had been betrayed, their cattle confiscated, their movements restricted. Death in battle is better than living as slaves. Nana murmured beside him. The warrior who had escaped San Carlos's iron shackles now faced another impossible choice that would determine the fate of the last free Apache band and forever change the American Southwest. Signs of discontent and the first escape. Geronimo's hand tightened around his rifle as he watched Lieutenant Davis from the shadows of Turkey Creek. The terms he'd accepted from Chief Gray Wolf in the Sierra Madre Mountains had been betrayed, their cattle confiscated, their movements restricted. Death in battle is better than living as slaves. Nana murmured beside him. The warrior who had escaped San Carlos's iron shackles now faced another impossible choice that would determine the fate of the last free Apache band and forever change the American Southwest. Turkey Creek Reservation had become a prison in all but name. Geronimo crouched among the scrub brush, observing the military encampment with undisguised contempt. The White Mountains of Arizona, once promised as a place where Apaches could live according to their traditions, had become yet another broken covenant. The white eyes cannot be trusted, Geronimo said quietly as Naichi approached silently from behind. They promise one thing and do another. No one saw me come, Naichi assured him. Settling beside the older warrior, I moved like a ghost. Geronimo nodded but remained tense. What of Chato? Does he suspect our plans to return to Mexico? Chato has changed, Naichi replied with evident disgust. Since leading Chief Gray Wolf to our Sierra Madre camps, he struts about like a rooster. He boasts of his service to the white soldiers. He spoke truth about one thing, Geronimo acknowledged reluctantly. Our raids did bring Chief Gray Wolf to Mexico. Their conversation halted as three figures approached, Nana, Mangus, and Chihuahua, all respected Apache leaders, who had also returned from Mexico under promises of fair treatment. This gathering represented a significant portion of the remaining Apache leadership, men who had fought American expansion for decades. Nana, the eldest among them at nearly 80 years, spoke first. We must talk about what has happened since our return from Sierra Madre. Geronimo recounted the agreement that had brought them back to Arizona. When I met with Chief Gray Wolf in Mexico, he promised we could return and live as Apaches. To avoid returning poor, we took 350 cattle from Mexican ranches. Cattle they had stolen from us over many years, Chihuahua interjected. Yes, Geronimo continued, but when we reached Fort Apache, the soldiers took all our cattle. This violated Chief Gray Wolf's promise. The confiscation of their cattle represented more than mere property loss. For the Apache, livestock constituted wealth, status, and survival resources. The seizure effectively returned them to dependency on government rations, a position of subjugation, rather than the self-sufficiency they had been promised. Where is Chief Gray Wolf now? Mangus asked. Where are Captain Crawford and Lieutenant Gatewood? These men we could trust. Gone, Geronimo replied bitterly. In their place we have strangers like Lieutenant Davis, who knows nothing of Apache ways. The absence of these specific military officers was critical. General George Crook, known to the Apache as Chief Gray Wolf, Captain Crawford, and Lieutenant Gatewood, had established reputations for fair dealing with the Apache. Their replacement by unfamiliar officers, with no history of honorable negotiations, created profound distrust. Geronimo described his recent interaction with Lieutenant Davis. I sent Mickey Free to tell Davis that I was killing people before he was born. He smiled grimly. This young officer thinks he can command warriors who have fought for 40 years. Nana nodded approvingly. You spoke well. These new officers must learn respect. Chihuahua, usually the most moderate of the leaders, now spoke with unexpected anger. They forbid us to live as warriors. They say we must plow the earth like slaves. No raiding, no fighting, even against tribes, who have been our enemies for generations. I only promised peace with white eyes, Geronimo clarified. I made no promise about Papagos or Navajos. We agreed to stay on the reservation and not trouble white settlers, nothing more. This distinction revealed a fundamental cultural misunderstanding. American authorities viewed peace as universal. disarmament and cessation of all conflict. For Apache leaders, peace agreements were specific to the parties involved, not a blanket abandonment of their martial traditions against traditional tribal enemies. Geronimo continued, his voice hardening. Life in White Mountains is not what Chief Gray Wolf promised. In Mexico we were free. Better to die fighting than live as slaves. Nana affirmed, repeating the sentiment that had sustained Apache resistance for decades. The conversation shifted to practical matters. Naiki reported their current strength. We have 35 warriors, 8 boys who can shoot, and 101 women and children. We could have more fighters if we had more weapons, he added. 3 boys must use bows and arrows. Geronimo considered this information. Smaller numbers move faster. We know white soldiers and Apache scouts will try to stop us. His eyes narrowed. I do not trust Lieutenant Davis. Naichi suggested confronting Davis directly, but Geronimo shook his head. We do not know if he suspects our plans. If we fight here, we waste bullets we will need later. Davis will use the telegraph wires to alert soldiers at Fort Thomas. Geronimo continued, running is wiser than fighting now. This tactical assessment demonstrated Geronimo's strategic sophistication. Rather than engaging in symbolic but costly resistance, he prioritized successful escape and long-term survival over immediate conflict. The Apache began their exodus as afternoon faded, moving in small groups to avoid detection. Women and children departed first, followed by warriors in staggered intervals. Geronimo remained until last, carefully scouting the area before slipping away. Unknown to them, Mickey Free, the half-Apache scout, whose childhood kidnapping had sparked the first Apache wars decades earlier, had been observing their preparations. He immediately reported to Lieutenant Davis. Davis rushed to the telegraph office at Fort Apache. Send this message to Captain Pierce at Fort Thomas. He ordered the operator. Geronimo and other leaders are escaping to Mexico. Even a few Apaches are more dangerous than wild wolves. Their escape will bring terror to Arizona and require another costly military campaign in Mexico. The telegraph operator began tapping out the message, but after only 5 minutes, he turned to Davis. Sir, I'm getting no response. The line appears to be cut. Keep trying, Davis insisted. I'm pursuing with scouts. He added grimly, tracking will be slow at night. This may mean another campaign into Mexico. Davis's assessment proved accurate. By the time American forces organized an effective pursuit, Geronimo and his followers had crossed the international border and disappeared into the Sierra Madre Mountains, a vast, rugged wilderness where Apache knowledge of the terrain gave them significant advantages over military pursuers. The second escape of Geronimo marked a critical turning point in Apache-American relations. What had begun as a negotiated peace under General Crook had deteriorated into renewed conflict under less experienced leadership. The escape triggered one of the most extensive military campaigns in American history, with implications that would reshape the Southwest and ultimately determine the fate of Apache autonomy. For Geronimo and his followers, the return to Sierra Madre represented not just physical freedom, but cultural survival. The reservation system, with its restrictions on movement, traditional practices, and self-sufficiency, threatened Apache identity more fundamentally than military defeat. Their flight was both resistance and preservation, a desperate attempt to maintain a way of life rapidly disappearing under American expansion. As they moved deeper into the mountains, Geronimo knew their freedom would come at tremendous cost. The forces that would pursue them now would be more numerous, better equipped, and more determined than any they had previously faced. The warrior who had broken San Carlos's chains had chosen freedom once again, but how long that freedom could last remained an open question. 3 nomadic life and raids, the Sierra Madre Mountains provided sanctuary, but not peace. Geronimo and Naichi led 12 remaining warriors through the darkness, pausing occasionally to observe the orange glow of burning ranches on the Arizona horizon. Their recent raid had secured fresh horses, though the ranch inhabitants had fled after exchanging only a few shots. Geronimo halted his horse on a ridge overlooking the border territory. The fires behind them represented more than destruction. They were messages of defiance and reminders that Apache resistance continued despite overwhelming odds. White eyes run instead of fighting. Naichi observed, gazing at the distant flames. Geronimo nodded. They lie about us too. In our last raid, we had only 6 warriors, but after Qaeda deserted to San Carlos, white newspapers claimed 200 Apache attacked. Information from the reservations arrived sporadically through trusted messengers. Loco, who had remained at San Carlos, sent inquiries about their strength, intelligence that could compromise their security if it reached American forces. Naichi worried constantly about his family who remained in Arizona, separated from him by his choice to continue resistance. Chihuahua had returned to the reservation during Chief Gray Wolf's second attempt to persuade the Apache to surrender. While Geronimo and Naichi had initially agreed to return, they changed their minds at the last moment, escaping with 18 men and 19 women and children back to Sierra Madre. General Crook's failure to secure Geronimo's surrender had significant consequences. Heavily criticized by both military superiors and the American public, Crook requested reassignment to Texas. His replacement, General Nelson Miles, arrived with 5,000 soldiers, specifically tasked with capturing Geronimo. The scale of forces arrayed against Geronimo's small band was unprecedented. Beyond American military personnel, Mexican rurales, ranchers, cowboys, miners, and townspeople actively participated in the manhunt. Conservative estimates suggested at least 10,000 people were actively working to capture or kill Geronimo and his followers, a ratio of approximately 270 pursuers for each Apache warrior. Through special diplomatic arrangements, American forces gained permission to operate south of the border, leading to numerous engagements with Geronimo's band. Despite casualties among American and Mexican forces, Geronimo lost no warriors in these confrontations, a remarkable tactical achievement that enhanced his legendary status. The constant pressure took its toll, however. During a particularly grueling retreat, Geronimo swayed in his saddle as flashes of light appeared before his eyes. He raised his hand to shield his vision from the phenomenon. "Are you ill?" Naichi asked with concern. "I am tired," Geronimo admitted, "not just in body but in spirit." Naichi nodded in understanding. "We have fought too long. 7 times in 15 months we have lost all our horses and had to steal more. Always we fear fighting too many soldiers." The constant cycle of loss and replacement depleted not just physical resources, but psychological resilience. Each raid increased pursuit intensity, creating a spiral of escalating risk for diminishing returns. "Everyone's spirit is tired," Naichi continued, "but we dare not surrender." Geronimo agreed solemnly. Chief Gray Wolf, Captain Crawford, Lieutenant Gatewood, all gone. No white man among our pursuers can be trusted now. He paused. "Sometimes I almost wish we had gone with Gray Wolf." The band stopped to rest in a small rocky canyon. Their horses stood with heads raised, nostrils flaring at the scent of water nearby. While the warriors waited, Geronimo took his Winchester rifle and went alone to scout. Camouflaging himself with branches, he crawled toward an adjacent canyon. There he discovered a water hole surrounded by green grass and cottonwood trees, a precious resource in the arid landscape. Unfortunately, a herd of horses grazed nearby, guarded by more than 20 soldiers who blocked access to the water. Geronimo retreated silently and reported to Naichi. "Too many to fight," he concluded after Naichi's questioning. "Then we must go elsewhere," Naichi suggested. "No," Geronimo replied, "we must release our horses." Naichi stared in disbelief. "Why give good horses to white soldiers? These horses are too tired to serve us anymore." Geronimo explained and ordered the horses released. After releasing their horses, Geronimo led the warriors to the edge of the canyon with the water hole. Again camouflaged, they observed as their thirsty horses arrived at the water and began drinking. Below, a young lieutenant ordered his men to mount up while an experienced scout argued against hasty action. Their conversation, clearly audible to the hidden Apache, revealed critical intelligence. "These must be Geronimo's horses," the scout insisted, noting the Pratt Ranch brand on the animals. "The Pratt Ranch has probably been burned, the Pratt brothers killed." The lieutenant dismissed these concerns. "If Geronimo has lost his horses, he and his people will be on foot." "No Apache ever lost horses except to scouts or soldiers," the scout countered. "Geronimo released these horses as part of some plan. Hunting Apaches on foot is nearly impossible." Despite the scout's warnings, the lieutenant ordered his men to follow the horse tracks, leaving their pack mules behind to increase speed. He rejected suggestions to leave guards, insisting he needed every man and expressing confidence that the Apache were running for Mexico like cowards. The lieutenant's ambition became clear when he declared, "Capturing or killing Geronimo will end the Indian Wars. In the Southwest, I expect a promotion." Once the soldiers departed, Geronimo signaled his warriors forward. They drank deeply from the water hole, then quickly searched the abandoned camp. Within minutes, they had collected all available rifles and ammunition. Each warrior mounted one of the abandoned pack mules, and Geronimo led them into rough terrain, where mules could travel, but horses could not. Long before the young lieutenant returned to find his camp plundered, the Apache were safely beyond pursuit. This incident exemplified Geronimo's tactical genius, converting a potential crisis into an opportunity to acquire fresh mounts and supplies while simultaneously misdirecting pursuers. The increasing pressure from both American and Mexican forces created an unprecedented military containment. While earlier Apache resistance had benefited from the international border as a tactical resource, crossing between countries to escape jurisdiction, diplomatic agreements now allowed American forces to operate in Mexican territory. This cooperation closed the border escape route that had sustained Apache resistance for decades. Each passing month reduced their numbers through attrition, injury, or surrender. The psychological toll of constant movement, separation from family, and unrelenting pursuit gradually eroded even the most committed warriors' resolve. Yet the alternative seemed equally unacceptable. The absence of trusted negotiators like Crook, Crawford, and Gatewood eliminated paths to honorable surrender. For warriors who had repeatedly witnessed broken promises and betrayal, capitulation without trustworthy intermediaries appeared to promise only imprisonment or execution. As spring turned to summer in 1886, Geronimo's band continued their desperate pattern of raid and retreat. A typical operation targeted isolated ranches, where horses could be acquired with minimal risk. The warriors would approach under cover of darkness, neutralize any resistance quickly, and depart with livestock before reinforcements could arrive. One particularly successful raid yielded 20 horses and supplies from a ranch near the border. The band crossed back into Mexico before dawn, using rugged mountain passes inaccessible to cavalry. When pursuit inevitably came, Geronimo employed his standard evasion tactics, splitting the group into smaller units that followed separate paths before reconvening at a predetermined location. This mobility represented both strength and vulnerability. While it allowed the Apache to evade larger forces, it also prevented establishment of secure camps where food could be stored and injuries treated. Women and children suffered particularly from this constant movement, enduring extremes of weather, insufficient nutrition, and limited medical care. By midsummer, the situation had grown desperate. American cavalry patrols had increased in frequency and range, while Mexican forces established checkpoints at known water sources. The traditional Apache strategy of dispersing during pressure became increasingly difficult as potential refuge areas diminished. Geronimo adapted by moving deeper into the Sierra Madre, seeking areas too remote for effective military operations. This strategy provided temporary security, but isolated the band from potential intelligence and supply sources. As ammunition dwindled and equipment wore out, replacement opportunities became scarce. The tactical waterhole incident demonstrated Geronimo's continued ability to outthink his pursuers despite these pressures. By sacrificing exhausted horses, resources that had become liabilities rather than assets, he created a diversion that allowed acquisition of superior resources. The abandoned pack mules provided both transportation and carried additional supplies that sustained the band for weeks. This success, however, came with increased pursuit intensity. The embarrassed lieutenant returned to headquarters with tales of Apache deception, triggering deployment of additional forces to the region. Cavalry units established a patrol network designed to restrict Geronimo's movement options and force confrontation on unfavorable terms. As summer progressed, the band found themselves increasingly confined to a shrinking territory. Water sources they had relied upon for generations now featured permanent military encampments. Game animals became scarce as hunting pressure increased, and natural migration patterns were disrupted by military activity. Geronimo's tactical options narrowed with each passing week. Raids became increasingly risky as ranch security improved and response times shortened. The physical exhaustion Naichi had described, losing and replacing horses 7 times in 15 months, accelerated as resources diminished and safe havens disappeared. By August 1886, Geronimo commanded fewer than 25 warriors. Some had been killed in skirmishes, others had surrendered at reservation boundaries, and a few had simply disappeared, perhaps returning to families or seeking individual survival away from the group. Those who remained showed signs of the extreme physical and psychological stress that accompanied their diminishing prospects. As they moved through the mountains with their stolen mules, Geronimo's band had won another day of freedom. But as summer heat baked the landscape and water sources dwindled, the question that haunted their leader remained unanswered. How many such days remained before the last free Apache would face their final choice? Meeting with a brave soldier, Geronimo sat beneath a pine tree on a mountain peak, gazing down at Mexico's Bavaspi River, gleaming like a silver ribbon below. At 58 years old, the warrior who had once been a medicine man found himself visited by visions he had unsuccessfully sought in his youth. His mind drifted through 46 years of warfare, from stealing Delgadito's warhorse as a boy to ambushing California volunteers at Apache Pass. The memories flowed uncontrollably: his happy days with Alope, the revenge battles after the Casquilla massacre, countless raids and escapes. Geronimo had been only 12 during his first battle against Papago horse thieves. Now, after nearly 5 decades of fighting, exhaustion had settled deep in his bones. Visions of great Apache leaders appeared before him. Old Mangus Coloradas leaving Membrino village to surrender to white men, and Cochise fighting fiercely for 10 years after Mangus's death, before eventually surrendering himself. These memories of proud leaders who ultimately chose capitulation troubled Geronimo deeply. When the visions faded, he turned to Naichi. "You wish to see your wife and children again?" Naichi nodded. "And you, is there no one waiting for you?" "No one," Geronimo replied simply. A hawk's whistle suddenly cut through the air, the signal for approaching strangers. A scout reported the visitors were few in number. Within 30 seconds, the Apache camp transformed. Women and children concealed the horses, while warriors took hidden positions for ambush. The efficiency of this response reflected years of practiced survival tactics. 2 Apache men rode into view. Geronimo recognized Kita, who had abandoned him during an Arizona raid, accompanied by a warrior named Martin. When they had ridden deep enough into the ambush zone, Geronimo and his hidden warriors rose simultaneously from concealment surrounding the visitors. Kita and Martin remained motionless, aware that any sudden movement meant death. Geronimo studied them carefully before speaking. "I am glad to see you again, Kita. I come because I respect you and admire your leadership." Kita replied cautiously, "I believe you do not hate me for returning to San Carlos." "Your path was there," Geronimo said evenly. "I have no reason to hate you." He paused. "Why have you returned bringing Martin with you?" "We come as messengers for a very brave soldier." Geronimo's face hardened. "I do not speak with soldiers. Would you like to hear his name?" "Yes, Lieutenant Gatewood," Kita said. Geronimo couldn't hide his surprise. Lieutenant Gatewood's reputation was unique among American officers: brave in battle, merciful in victory, and unfailingly honest. Their paths had crossed numerous times in combat. "I have heard Lieutenant Gatewood was sent far from Apache country," Geronimo said with the respect one great warrior accords another. "That is true," Kita confirmed. "He was in a place so distant I do not know its name. But when he learned you refused to speak, with the soldiers pursuing you, he came as someone you trust." "How many soldiers are with him?" 6 messengers, not warriors. 2 interpreters, Jose, Maria, and Tom Horn." "Is that all?" "That is all who travel with Lieutenant Gatewood." Kita answered carefully. "But there are many soldiers nearby. Does this brave soldier wish to speak with me?" Kita nodded. Geronimo considered the request with grave seriousness. After a long moment, he decided, "I will speak with Lieutenant Gatewood, 6 messengers, Tom Horn, Jose, and Maria. No others may come." To our meeting place. If soldiers come, we will fight." Martin departed to deliver this message, while Quieta remained as hostage to ensure honest communication. Geronimo stood silently watching as Lieutenant Gatewood's small party approached. The lieutenant appeared somewhat ill but rode and carried himself like a true warrior, his demeanor completely at ease despite the dangerous circumstances. True to his word, he brought only 6 messengers and 2 interpreters. Geronimo's mind flashed back 6 years to an unnamed canyon, where he and Naichi had lured an American cavalry company into an ambush near a waterhole. The Apache had attacked suddenly and might have killed everyone if Lieutenant Gatewood hadn't rallied his men and led them out of the trap. A disturbing thought crossed Geronimo's mind. His warriors could easily kill these visitors in less than a minute. But he immediately knew he would never give such an order, not against this particular officer who had earned his respect through courage and honesty. The significance of this meeting extended far beyond the individuals involved. For Geronimo, Lieutenant Gatewood represented perhaps the last trustworthy intermediary between Apache freedom and American authority. After General Crook's departure and the breakdown of previous negotiations, Gatewood's arrival offered a potential bridge across a gulf of mistrust that had seemed unbridgeable. Lieutenant Gatewood's personal risk in coming with such a small escort demonstrated exceptional courage. American military protocols typically required larger protective detachments for officer safety, particularly when meeting hostile forces. By arriving with minimal accompaniment, Gatewood showed both trust and respect, qualities Geronimo valued above all others in his adversaries. The moment crystallized the complex relationship between these lifelong enemies. Despite years of mutual combat, a foundation of professional respect had developed between certain Apache leaders and specific American officers. This respect created narrow channels of communication that occasionally transcended the broader conflict. For the Apache warriors watching from concealment, the situation presented a profound dilemma. Their tactical position offered complete military advantage. They could eliminate this American party with minimal risk. Yet Geronimo's decision to honor the meeting reflected recognition that military victory in this instance would represent strategic defeat, eliminating perhaps their last opportunity for negotiation with someone they could trust. The Apache resistance had reached its decisive moment. With thousands of American and Mexican troops tightening their search perimeter, dwindling supplies, and exhausted warriors, Geronimo faced the culmination of his 46-year struggle. Lieutenant Gatewood's arrival forced the question that had haunted his recent visions of Mangus Coloradas. Was there a time when continued resistance served no purpose, when surrender became the only path to survival? As Lieutenant Gatewood dismounted and approached, Geronimo stepped forward to meet him. The fate of the last free Apache band hung in the balance of what would be said between these two warriors, who had fought against each other for so many years. The final surrender. Lieutenant Gatewood dismounted, handed the reins to a messenger, and shook Geronimo's hand. The Apache leader searched the officer's face for any sign of fear, but found none. Despite his pale complexion, Gatewood carried himself with the dignity that had earned him respect among enemies and allies alike. "Your face is white," Geronimo observed, "like one who has not seen the sun or who has been sick." "It is nothing," Gatewood replied. "I have traveled far and fast to speak with you." "You are my friend," Geronimo said. Gatewood shook his head. "You are no friend to white men, or Mexicans while you live like a wild animal, raiding and killing. Even your fellow Apache oppose you now. Accept those with you. You have brought shame to peaceful Apache." Geronimo nodded, acknowledging the blunt assessment. "Many want my blood, you speak straight. What do you want from me?" he asked. "I myself want nothing," Gatewood replied. "As a soldier, I can demand nothing. But on behalf of General Miles, commander of all troops pursuing you, I ask that you and your band surrender." "What does General Miles offer in return?" "Imprisonment in Florida for you and your families." Geronimo's face darkened with anger. "Is General Miles crazy? His army has chased us for months. We have fought many times. Many soldiers have died, but not one Apache has been killed by white soldiers. Does he know we can continue fighting?" "He knows," Gatewood confirmed. "But if you do not surrender, he will hunt and kill you all. even if it takes 50 more years. Tell General Miles we will return to Arizona if we can go home to White Mountains and live as before we fled to Mexico." Gatewood shook his head. "That is childish talk. You have had many chances to prove you would live peacefully on the reservation. There will be no more chances. General Miles orders imprisonment in Florida or death by soldiers." "We can kill soldiers too," Geronimo reminded him. "Yes, but in the old days, Apache outnumbered white men many times. Now it is reversed. You cannot kill all the soldiers." "They cannot kill all Apache either and keep their terms," Geronimo countered. Gatewood suddenly turned to Naichi with a smile. "I saw your mother and daughter recently, when they came in with Chihuahua's group. They have been sent to Florida with the others, but both asked about you." Naichi leaned forward eagerly. "Are they well?" "Very well," Gatewood assured him. "They want you to surrender so you can be together. And remember, a crueler enemy than any soldier waits for you the coming winter." "Is that your final answer?" Gatewood asked Geronimo. "Can we talk again tomorrow?" Yes, they parted ways, the Apache returning to their camp deep in thought. That night, Geronimo addressed his followers. "Few animals have been hunted as relentlessly as we have been," he said. "We have fought well, but we are too few against too many." Naichi nodded. "We cannot fight forever. I want to see my friends and family again. There is little chance for that while we are in Mexico and they are in Florida." Others agreed. All were exhausted and lonely, having endured beyond human limits. They would continue fighting if Geronimo and Naichi deemed it best, but their spirits were broken. "I fear surrender more than continued fighting," Naichi admitted. "Both Mexicans and Americans will kill us as easily as they kill wild wolves. Who will protect us until we reach Florida safely, if we give our weapons to Lieutenant Gatewood?" Geronimo sat silently, suddenly overwhelmed by the complete vision he had glimpsed earlier. He saw Mangus Coloradas advising peace with white men because they could never be defeated. He saw Cochise requiring 10 years of bloody warfare to understand what Mangus had known through wisdom. Now, nearly 25 years after Mangus Coloradas' death, Geronimo finally understood what one leader had known and the other had learned. Apache could not defeat white men in prolonged conflict, but neither could they surrender without guarantees of safety. When negotiations resumed the next day, Geronimo asked Gatewood a direct question. "Forget you are white. Pretend you are one of us. What would you do?" "I would trust General Miles and surrender," Gatewood answered without hesitation. "We will do that," Geronimo decided. "But the road to the border where General Miles waits is long, and this is enemy country. We will not give up our weapons until we meet General Miles." Gatewood agreed and added that Captain Lawton's company could escort them to help fight off any Mexican attacks. "You may travel with us," Geronimo stipulated. "Captain Lawton and his soldiers may go ahead or behind. We will not mix with white soldiers." Again, Gatewood agreed. This was how the Apache marched to the Mexican border, with Lieutenant Gatewood traveling alongside them. Captain Lawton provided an American military escort, while 200 vengeful Mexicans followed at a distance, unwilling to attack with American troops present. When they reached General Miles' camp, Geronimo walked proudly toward the general, who regarded the great Apache leader coldly. Geronimo and his warriors laid down the weapons they had carried through countless miles in battles. The disarmed Apache were surrounded by soldiers and first taken to cells at Fort Bowie, Arizona, then transported by train to exile in Florida. Thus ended the fighting days of Geronimo, the last and fiercest Apache war leader, and with him ended the Indian Wars in the Southwest. Never again would isolated ranchers and villagers wake in the night, trembling at the sound of hoofbeats and fierce Apache war cries. Never again would travelers in Arizona, New Mexico, and northern Mexico need to move in armed groups for fear of Apache attacks. Geronimo and his followers, along with many other Chiricahua and Warm Springs Apache, were imprisoned at Old Fort Pickens or Fort Marion in Florida. Eventually, they were transferred to a reservation in Indian Territory, now Oklahoma, where Geronimo died at Fort Sill on February 17, 1909. Whether he was a great villain or a great patriot depends on whether one views him through the eyes of the white settlers he raided or the Apache people he fought to protect. But none can deny that he fought for a free life, for himself and his people, and stands among history's greatest warriors. Long after the Southwest Territories became states and the frontier was declared closed, Geronimo's name endured as a symbol of ultimate resistance. The Apache leader who began life as Goyakla became a cultural icon representing both the tragedy of Native American displacement and the indomitable human spirit that refuses subjugation. In his final years at Fort Sill, Geronimo sold photographs and autographs to curious visitors, rode in Theodore Roosevelt's inaugural parade, and dictated his autobiography, Transformations, that would have been unimaginable to the young warrior who first took up arms against Mexican forces at Arispe. His journey from feared resistance fighter to carefully managed celebrity embodied the complex fate of indigenous peoples in modern America. Yet beneath these contradictions remained the essence of a man who, when faced with the extinction of his way of life, chose to fight against impossible odds, rather than surrender his people's freedom without struggle. In this determination, Geronimo transcended his time and circumstances to become something more enduring than even he could have imagined, not just a warrior, but a testament to the human capacity for resistance against overwhelming power.